you very much for this introduction. I'm really excited to be here with you today. I am Dominik. I'm representing Grow Space, which is the organization, NGO focused on mental health and youth. We are active in Poland, but of course open to diverse cooperation also internationally. So for today, I prepared some short presentation for the topic because I really want to bring the discussion from that. And when we were reflecting on the name of this session, we came up with these hidden problems because when we are thinking about the technology, the influence of virtual reality, technology, social media on young people's mental health, there is a lot of debate coming over, which is very much present right now in a public debate in Poland, but also in the other countries as well. It is a nationwide issue regarding the regulations that the countries are putting for limitations, for example, for social media usage, intense internet usage, or the smartphones in schools. Many countries are coming with their own regulations. For example, Scandinavia, also Australia, they have put nationwide limitations. And actually, I have the feeling that, of course, many countries are coping with this issue in a different way. But in this debate, pros and cons of, for example, smartphones in schools, social media access and usage, and so on, we tend to be very much focused on the debate and argumenting from both sides. But sometimes we are lacking the crucial thing, which is that young people are facing many challenges, for example, in their school time and so on, regarding the internet usage, such as disinformation, violent content, the hate speech, for example, in an online way. The change of the notion of relationships or friendships are also changing with the influence of the technology and the internet space, which is very interesting when we see that the public debate is only focused on one thing. I prepared the short presentation, so let me start by this and then invite you also to the discussion, because I would like to share the results of the short research that's as Growspace we conducted in Poland. It is a research for one country only, but I think that many of you can also relate and maybe comment, maybe put some thoughts about your countries, or also about the challenges, because I think that in this area of mental health, the influence of the internet usage and the virtual reality, that's a common problem for us. It's not the question of one country. It's, the challenges are probably very similar. But our research was focused here in Poland. So if you can share the PDF, I will be very much thankful for that.
Is that showing up okay?
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah.
Is that okay?
I see it.
Might be a little bit of a delay, Dominik.
Okay, I don't see it yet, but if that's not the case, I also remember the slides that I put there. So
I'm not sure it's in display mode, and I think there's a couple of that blue stripe. You can get rid of that at the top.
Yeah. What I'm seeing is the Growth Space website in the browser.
Let's see. Presentation mode.
There you go. So the blue bar is gone. Okay. So we can see, I would say, Dominik, go ahead, walk us through.
okay, perfect. I don't see it, so I will need to make it from my memory, but let me make a try for that. So I will start with a short introduction of the data, and then we'll move on with the discussion, because first of all, I would like to say why we conducted the research in a way that it is presented. First of all, I know that many countries have already put the nationwide regulations on, for example, smartphone usage and social media access for youth and adolescents. But in Poland, we don't have the regulations coming from the Ministry of Education or Ministry of Cyber Safety or Ministry of Health. So we decided to actually investigate how the local communities and how particular school environments are fixing the problem by themselves. So we asked the representative number of the schools across the country with the public information access. It's a tool that you can use for every public institution in Poland to ask them actually questions on their let's say, actions, attitudes, and regulations, how the access to the smartphone is regulated in the schools, and also how do they manage with for example, the internet space, virtual reality, with the young people that are, for example, addicted to the technology, addicted to smartphones, or perhaps sometimes are overstimulated with the internet and the social media. Actually, it's probably on the second slide after the entry. We found that very interesting, because even despite the lack of the regulations on the level of the country, so no let's say indications coming from the ministry, actually over 50% of the schools made a ban of the smartphones in particular school environments. That's the first thing. The large majority is putting any type of the regulations into their own statutes. So the vast majority is actually regulating the thing, but slightly over 50% is making a total ban of the smartphones usage in schools. 12% is using a deposit. So, for example, the place that young students are required to put the smartphone before entering the classroom to be more focused, for example, on the lessons. It's only 12% of the schools that took part in the research. And also, what is very interesting is also to show the tendency that was coming from the different school environment, because actually 1/3 of all investigated schools have admitted that they made the rule stricter over time. So the tendency is that the regulations are going to be much more strict over time, because 3 years ago there were probably much more liberal in terms of the smartphone usage. Right now they are much more strict, for example, with the deposits or the ban. It's not the question how it is working, it's the question how numerous are the institutions that actually decided to use it as a tool to regulate and limit the technology usage, which is very interesting when we compare that into the public debate when, well, we need to be more focused also on other problems, but I will come back to it later. Last thing, what was also interesting is that the majority of the schools, almost 90% of the schools had at least once the cyber education lessons, but rather these were only punctual classes or punctual workshops for students. There is no, let's say, strategy in our system to for the cyber hygiene or the cyber safety for young students in the education system. But the majority of the schools are actually trying to make at least punctual activities, which is a good sign for us. And on the next slide, you can also see let's say the summary of of advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons in the debate, because actually many young people were involved into the debate of the smartphone usage by themselves. Actually, it's rather my opinion, not a research hypothesis, but rather my opinion, like driving on the results from those schools that actually put a smartphone ban, is that when young people are much more involved in the participatory creation of the rules, they are much more likely also to follow them in the schools. So, for example, the ban that is only imposed by the schools, for example, in the statutes or in the other place, sometimes it's not working because the young people in the qualitative research, they admitted that the imposed rules are also the rules that, well, let's say, are not understood by the community. And here, it's, of course, the research with the quantitative data from the schools and also qualitative interviews with particular students for one country, but I'm also interested for our discussion. Do you see the same tendency also in your countries or the regulations that are coming over? And perhaps we are too much focused on this debate, because I myself, while doing the research, I had the feeling that, okay, we are investigating this thing. It's very interesting to see how the tendency looks like in Poland. But when we were talking to young people themselves and the youth organizations, the youth student councils in schools, and also not involved young people just in their education process, they were arguing that the whole debate is lacking sense, because actually they are coping with the misinformation in the social media, intense usage, hate speech, the question of technology addiction, the challenges with AI, and so on and so on. These are the issues that they would like to put in their education and into more understanding of the challenges, because they argued that the limitations are needed in some cases, but they need to be also understood by the community. So I'm really interested in opening up for this discussion. I have probably two more slides later, but let's maybe open up for your comments, views, questions, or perspective from particular countries.
Thank you, Dominik. I haven't checked the chat just because I was sharing, but please, anyone feel free to speak up.
Yeah, so I'll speak up. Dominik, thank you very much for that. I hope you can't hear the background noise. Thank you for that short presentation. I love the emphasis here on digital hygiene, because I think that so often this topic gets positioned or framed as we're going to take something away from children. And while certainly that's the case, I think that anything is more easily accepted if, as you're taking something away from me, you're also giving me something. And I think that there's been an underemphasis on what I'm going to call technology-enabled wellness, how we use these devices to actually enhance our wellness, as a balance against digital minimalism, which is we need to minimize the use of the technology so that we use the technology and the technology doesn't just use us, or the corporations behind technology doesn't just use us. So thank you for that emphasis. And I'll stop at that.
Thanks, Greg. Kevin?
Yeah, no, I mean, I asked a question there, which is like, why is this a surprise? Because we ban talking in classrooms because we know it disrupts other students' learning. You don't want to learn, that's fine. Nobody can make you learn. But I'm also sort of thinking like, any digital technology, any technology whatsoever, it's a tool. And to use a tool, you have to learn how to use it. But we've been convinced we don't need to do that with smartphones, that we don't have to teach people how to use them because they're intuitive, whatever, and there are, shall we say, nefarious reasons for that. Dopamine addiction being one, and the fact that you are the product. So I mean, it's a fantastic effort. It's deplorable that, we would launch something on the world with as little um, perspective on the consequences as we've had with smartphones. Yeah, it's a tool. You have to learn how to use a tool. You don't give a child a chisel and say, get on with it. I'm mystified, but then I'm too old.
Exactly. And I'm also myself, which is my opinion that I'm really in favor of the progress on that. And I'm really in favor of using, advanced technology to enhance learning process, to enhance the innovation and so on and so on. But really, sometimes you forgot about something. And that's the case with mental health and well-being in terms of the smartphone usage, because actually also young people are perceiving it as a challenge. For example, the groups in Ireland, the youth clubs in Ireland are arguing for creating, for example, so-called smartphone-free zones when you are coming to, for example, a room that's you leave the smartphone behind and you can actually talk to each other and to be in a smartphone-free place, which is very, very interesting. And that was also what you mentioned, the case that that was also one of the reasons why we decided to investigate the regulations themselves, because for me, the regulations and those, let's say, ban and statutes and so on, they are a result of a certain unsolved problem. I would see that we have the unsolved problem, which is worldwide, with the using technology, the internet space, the addiction to the technology among young people, and so on and so on. This is a worldwide phenomenon, and that was very interesting for us, how to see how very local communities and very local schools are coping with this phenomenon by themselves. They are not imposed by the ministry to do something, so they need to come up with a solution that I would say, no one did not yet, because actually many countries are, a bit trying their own thing. And we do not have any, let's say, I mean, this debate is growing right now, and we are not, we don't have a single solution yet. So it was very interesting to see that the local communities are trying to regulate this phenomenon by themselves. So I would see these regulations as a result of some process that took part. Melika, you are willing to speak up.
Yes, I actually have a question. So nowadays we see so many different digital platforms that young people are using, social media, like virtual reality, social platforms, games, and so many other things. So my observation is that people present different aspects of their identity and they express themselves differently in different platforms. And sometimes these behaviors are not very pro-social, let's say. So I think that when we talk about regulation, this is also important to note that the education, as you mentioned, educating people on digital hygiene and to use this tools is missing. But what age and should we include this education, and how should we promote this in educational system so it's acceptable and people are willing to go in that route to educate their children or educate themselves to use this platforms in a pro-social approach?
So I can start with the answer, but I'm open also for your suggestion, because that's probably also one of the unsolved questions that many would argue somehow differently. But in my opinion, it's the younger the better to start to understand the challenges of the technology. It's not that we should, of course, teach advanced system at the very young age. It's about teaching teaching how to use the critical thinking. It's how to use the internet if needed. It's how to use, for example, the research tools and so on and so on. I'm convinced that it should start at a very young age. It's because we don't want the situation to be, for example, you are growing and you achieve 18 years old, 19 years old, and right now you are permitted to do everything you want and you can just go by yourself to like every virtual space that you want, because then you have the risk that, well, it was prohibited the years before, so right now I can do everything, I can use everything, so I will do whatever I like. That's not the solution, and I think we should start talking about the technology with the young children. And it's also because when I think about the generation Z and the generation Alpha that is right now, even at the younger age, they are so attached to the notion of to be authentic. And if, for example, there are parents, teachers that they are using smartphones and they are actually Googling everything and using the ChatGPT to come up with a solution, but they say at the same time to their children that, oh, you are not permitted to do that, but I can do it here in a classroom or as a parent. That's not working actually, because then you are putting a wrong example, because, okay, you say that I cannot, but you are doing the same thing. So how does it really work? And actually, in the researches that were also about the whole generation Z, the whole generation Alpha, it was also one of the values that these generations are putting at a very high level. It's to be authentic. And if you want to be authentic, you also need to show yourself that you are not using only ChatGPT for that. And if you do, then explain maybe why and what are the limitations and why are you double checking, why it's not a crucial answer, why it's not the only answer possible to for your question. That's a bit my point of view on that, but I'm interested to hear yours as well.
Yeah, can I weigh in on that?
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking about the word hygiene, right? So when we think about the raising of children, when do we teach them hygiene? We teach them as early as the interaction that they're having might harm them. So you might consider, or here's an analogy or a metaphor. Digital technology and social media are like a substance in the environment. It's like the toothpaste in my bathroom, the cleaner under the sink in my kitchen. And as soon as my child is old enough to be able to reach any of those substances, I'm educating them. Use this much of it, but not so much that it poisons you. Use it in this particular use case or context for these purposes. Like we use toothpaste once or twice a day to brush our teeth, but we don't do it 5 times a day. We don't use it to clean, to polish our silverware. So if you think about that, the technology is a substance. We're always teaching our children and modeling ourselves, to Dominik's point, what is an inert, therapeutic, and toxic application of the substances that exist around us in the environment. I think that if we can begin to think about the idea that we've allowed this substance to be used at a toxic level, and we have seen the poisonous toxic effect of it. And so this re-education is about trying to re-educate so that we use the technology in a therapeutic or healing manner that makes for wellness and productivity without going overboard. That's how I'm trying to start thinking about these, we call them restrictions, right? But we don't think of it as a restriction. Again, I'll stick with it, that you have to brush your teeth twice a day. We think this is something that's done at a certain level for purposes of your wellness, but don't overdo it because it could in fact harm you. So I just want to weigh in with that. But certainly we have to re-educate ourselves. The other thing I would say to Dominik, so I have a grandson who regularly says, "Granddad, how come I can only use my Chromebook 3 hours a day, but I see you using your smartphone all day?" But I engage him in that discussion. I say, well, that's a good challenge. That challenges me to minimize my use. But do understand, I have to use mine more than 3 hours a day because you want to eat tonight. So, there's different chats about for why adults use it versus children. But I think as adults, good modeling is being accountable to the questions of children versus my mom would have just said, that's none of your business. So I'm trying to be a better grandfather than I was a father in that respect. Okay, I'll stop at that. Thanks for asking.
Thank you, Craig. And just before Dominik responds, Karen put a nice perspective in the chat. If you wanted to read that, Craig, and also everyone, and he wanted to speak to that because modeling behavior is sometimes really challenging when you don't have the time or knowledge.
Yes, but understand that while in the past we hardly knew the dangers. So let's put it this way. We know about the dangers of cleaning products because warning labels are put on them, right? Well, research is more and more giving us warning labels. I mean, I wish we'd get to the place where the government would make the technologies, Snapchat should have a warning label on it, right? But the thing is that the point of it advocating for and advancing the advocating for greater digital literacy in the society is about creating a greater awareness of the risks of Snapchat, AI, and these other technologies, as well as hoping that we do get to a place where there are warning labels. I remember when we didn't have privacy warning labels on the app stores, but now we do, which shows that we can progress. So now let's continue to advocate for even greater presence of warnings on these technologies we're using, like cleaning products, which, by the way, also didn't always have warning labels until the government made manufacturers do that. But good question, Karen. Thank you.
Wow. First of all, I was impressed with the metaphors, Craig, that you mentioned in your statement, because actually I did not think in that way, but right now I'm like really convinced that when we are talking, like, should we even mention the regulations and restrictions? Maybe that's just a proper sense of using, not maybe we should reform the wording here as well to think about it. And I think it shows us a bit like how really is this debate growing, that we are, even searching a proper words. But I thank you for that. I'm taking it from here, and I will maybe reflect on how to use that wording in future reports, because actually maybe it's not a restriction. Maybe that's something that is only instruction for us. And thank you also for Karen for your input into the warning labels, for example, because I think that's the example with the Snapchat is for me a very, how to say, very good because actually the Snapchat is some kind of a tool that is like properly hidden, because actually young people were, sending the messages and the snapshot and so on by themselves. Teachers were not informed about what they are actually sending. So some insults, jokes, comments, and so on could happen on the Snapchat without the knowledge of the teachers, of the parents, and actually they disappeared. So no one was able to discover what was actually there. And for me, it's also an example how the peer-to-peer violence unfortunately changed over time, because actually in the past we were seeing it as potential physical or psychological violence only, which right now can be visible. And for example, the insults, the hate speech, the peer-to-peer violence in the internet, in the social media platforms, is not that visible by adults. So for me, like maybe the idea with warning labels is some kind of a solution as well. But also I'm really convinced that it's also the question of the algorithms of the platforms, for example, to show certain content to certain users, especially under the age of 18. And to regulate the usage, the warning usage are sometimes restricting the age of the usage. In the theory, we have this restriction of 13 years old that are not able to be present on Facebook or Instagram. But we also know at the same time that it's well, let's say the rule, but there are many exceptions, and the people that are under the age of 13 are largely present in social media, which actually is not, how to say, executed with within the platforms. So for me, yes, that was also an example that I was thinking about, why it's also hidden, because those problems that are coming, they are not only hidden in the sense of the public debate, but also hidden in a sense that, well, if you do not say that you receive insults via Snapchat, for example, because it's disappearing, no one will probably know it. So, and for example, for me, it's also the question in the classroom, and when we talk with the young people, the parents, the students, the teachers, also of renaming those behaviors, because actually taking a snapshot and a picture for Snapchat without someone's consent is a violence. And actually, in many schools, it was probably not said that it can be violent for someone. That it should not occur. Many teachers were like, okay, they are doing something. I don't know. I will not, well, let's say, approach that topic. But actually, that's also cyber violence. It's not only receiving hateful comments, it's also doing something without someone's consent related to the technology.
Thank you, Dominik. Just a quick point. Going back to I think it was 12% you said that they were meant to deposit their phones during lessons. I was just thinking ethically, are there any exceptions to that where the student would be allowed to keep their phone for medical emergencies or religious or spiritual, just some kind of reason to have an exception to that ban? And then, yeah, just I guess how would the student feel if they're without their phone, just sort of for those reasons? Because you can imagine someone in an airplane flying 5 hours without a flight or without a phone. But just in this school context, if you could just explain a bit more about that.
So the deposit is, I would say, the more and more present right now. That's the way of the students that are willingly giving those smartphones into a special box or, I don't know, a shelf at the entrance of the classroom. It is the solution that came out a bit of the debate on the question of the property, because actually the teachers, at least under the Polish law, but I think that can be similar in many countries, are not able to bring someone's phone, because that's violating the constitutional right to the property, right? If I am a young person, I have my own phone and I'm coming with that in school, you cannot just bring it, and because I misuse it or overuse it during the lessons, you cannot just take it out. So the deposit is a way that they willingly put by themselves. They can observe that the phone is not harmed, blah blah blah, and they can put it and they can bring it after the lesson. Some students actually were coming with two phones, and they were putting one in the deposit and the other that they would like to use anyways. So I would say this restrictions, it's not working all the time, but for I perceive it as some kind of a consensus between not to make a total ban, but also make a limitation for the classroom. I think in terms of, for example, to be focused on the lesson, to be much more in depth of what is talking, what the teacher is talking about in the classroom. It's very important, but of course with some exceptions for the medical aid that were given. That's of course the case if someone is, I don't know, monitoring their for example, the glucose state in some of the cases in a medical. That's of course you can do it anyway. So in these exceptions, that's present. Even if the school is posing a total ban, right? It's of course possible if it's from the medical reasons. Then of course the total ban is not for you, because you can use it for medical reasons as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Dominik. And I think Karen just made an example of diabetes.
Oh yes, diabetes. Yes. I was lacking the proper word, but yeah.
Okay, anyone else? We've got just over 10 minutes. Love to hear more voices. I'm happy to just add a further comment. I wondered, so there's a recent example of children filming teachers in school without their consent. And I just wondered, did you come across this as a problem at all, just in your research?
In this particular research, no, because we were investigating like the proper, let's say, regulations and how the internal school law is working. But in the public debate or more, let's say, observation stage, you can hear also about it. In a public debate in Poland. Actually, some students were filming teachers, their peers, or any school staff, for example, during the lesson or during the school day. That was the case with, for example, certain school subjects, actually. But also for us, it was sometimes interesting material. For example, they were sometimes aware of the certain behavior that is not acceptable, and they filmed it and published it as an example of, for example, violating the students' rights and so on and so on. So for me, that was like from two sides, because from one hand it was for, let's say, some kind of a proof or a defense in some case, but on the other hand, it's also the question of this, filming without consent, which is very difficult. I don't know how numerous are the cases of filming the teachers, but I know that the cases of filming another students and their peers, it's very, very often, and it's happening not only on Snapchat, but also on the other platforms, and also just for kicks, let's say, with other students. Actually, that's sometimes it's filming for insults, for the improper behavior, and so on and so on. So I would say this phenomenon is rather further to be investigated, because right now we know the cases, we do not know, at least in Poland. Maybe you have some data in your countries, but for this phenomenon, I think we are up to check the incidence of how often it happens.
Great, thank you. More questions?
Yeah, I was going to say that as this particular area of regulation evolves, I really hope that there's a lot of consideration of context and intention, because it's one of those things where you say don't record, but then that hammer can be used to break a window or to build a house, from the standpoint that there are instances where recording has a proper ethical use, and then other instances where it does not. And so the ability to delineate that versus just having a blanket statement is important for courts and arbitrators and this sort of thing to be able to consider in any given context. So interesting. That's the Promethean dilemma. Prometheus gives us fire. Can we cook dinner without burning down the house?
Yes. That's interesting point. And yeah, I agree that like sometimes it can be, in a difficult situations. Like there was a case that was actually like hitting the public debate, I think 2 months ago. It was not at school, it was the university, however, when the one person at the University of Warsaw, here just nearby, was very brutally killed by a person, just during the day. It was, I don't know, 4 p.m. or sometimes, and actually it was, I will not describe the details, but it was a very, very brutal murder, really, in front of the cameras, in front of the building, like people were watching, and some people reacted by filming it. And they recorded the case. They recorded the vehicle that was standing over the person that was committing this crime, and so on and so on. And actually, we as Grow Space Foundation made a statements for those people in terms of their well-being afterwards, because many students, of course, were frightened by this, were scared to what happened at the university. At the same time, they were really in a deep how to say, deep sadness, kind of when you lost someone. Sorry, I missed the word. Of course, and we made a statement that okay, like it's we do not assess whether you filmed it or not. It's like, okay, you did it, but what you do with that recording is very, very important, because we were against putting it online, because many people, for clicks, they put it as a clickbait, and the whole video of the whole scenery was put in the internet. And actually, we were making an appeal for the students and for the university not to share that, but it could be also used as a material for the police. So we made a statement: if you have a recording, if you have a photo, then please use it in a good way to, for example, send it to the police station for their investigations, and not put it online because you share the violent content. And the people that were actually only watching that the scene, but also the videos, they are also harmed by the violence, because actually violence is harming, of course, the person that is like against, but also violence is harming the whole environment and the people that are around it as well. And sometimes we forget about this, that the incidence of violence is also influencing the whole community and the whole environment, not only the person that is put to. So that was also our statement with that. And we did not make an assessment, okay, it's unethical, it's ethical to record or not. Well, we did not focus on that. We focus on the intention and the steps that you can make with those recordings, even of a very harmful situation.
Thank you, Dominik. I haven't read the chat again because I'm so fixated on the conversation. So if anyone wants to speak from the chat, please do. We've got a couple more minutes. And I'll pose a question just if we're waiting. Just with your survey was national, and so I wondered if you saw any differences between rural versus urban environments with the adoption of self-enforced or self-guided framework implementation.
That's an interesting question, of course, because actually in the biggest cities, first of all, yes, we saw the differences between biggest cities and the countryside and the rural areas, but it was the main factor that was differentiating both areas in the geographical landscape, was that actually the biggest cities were much more, well, let's say, open and closer to the NGOs and how to say cyber hygiene lessons. They had a lot more access to the for example, persons, the experts, the NGOs, the workshops, and so on and so on with the cyber hygiene lessons than the rural and remote areas that, for example, should have I don't know, adopted it by themselves. Only it was the question of one teacher or one person that was interested in the topic, or, for example, using the online tools for further spreading on the lessons. So that was, I would say, the main factor that differentiated different geographical locations, but also in terms of the regulations and the stricter rules, we did not see a proper difference between bigger cities and the rural areas. However, I can say that we saw that between primary and secondary school much more. For example, in the primary school, the rules were much more strict than in the secondary school, which is kind of like intuitional, as you may think, because in the primary, total ban was much more present. And for example, in the secondary school, the deposits were also preferred solutions for that, no matter where the school was located, whether it was rural, remote area, or the small town, or the biggest city. So that was also interesting. And also slightly we saw the difference between the progressive and conservative side of the country. Poland is a country that is actually divided by, well, let's say the approach to the values and the political views. And one side of the country is typical, much more progressive. One is much more conservative than the other. Actually, in the conservative areas, it was the case that the rules were slightly more strict. But we also saw the regions and the local communities on the progressive, in the progressive geographical locations that were also very strict. So I wouldn't say it's a clear tendency, just a slight difference, which is like further to be investigated. For this, it's interesting fact here, but whether it's a tendency for future, we don't know.
Right. Well, I'll pause for any last questions, any burning questions. Put your hand up or just speak out. But otherwise, we're right on time for Big Ben. So it's just one chime this time. But yeah, thank you so much, Dominik. I certainly learned a lot, and it was really nice dialogue. So thanks everyone for metaphors and all kinds of ways of seeing this. And yeah, I wish you all the best with your future work. And yeah, keep doing great things. There's some thank yous in the chat as well. So
Thank you
yeah.
very much for this discussion and inputs, and also have a nice other sessions.